Imagine waking up one morning to learn that your country has gone bankrupt. The money in your wallet, even the money in your bank account, is losing value by the hour. Bank doors are locked shut. The president appears on television and addresses the nation. We have seized all private banks in the country. From now on, they are state banks. Your savings? Frozen. Your future? Uncertain. On September 1st, 1982, millions of Mexicans experienced exactly this. A proud, ambitious nation collapsed under the weight of its own debt and officially declared bankruptcy. Just a few years earlier, Mexico was not forgotten, backward economy lingering on the edge of history. It was a rising star, a future oil superpower, a symbolic nation that believed it could take control of its own destiny in the developing world. Major banks in New York, London, and Frankfurt were lining up to pour money into Mexico. The government believed oil revenues would cover all debts, and it borrowed recklessly. Politicians proudly spoke of liberation from U.S. dominance and of Mexico leading the developing world into a new era. By the late 1970s, Mexicans felt, finally, it's our turn. But history's timing can be cruel. The global economy was already unstable. The oil shocks of the 1970s had thrown everything into chaos, and Mexico's new wealth had emerged from that very turmoil. As inflation surged in the United States, Paul Volcker took over the Federal Reserve in 1979 and raised interest rates aggressively to crush inflation. Mexico, meanwhile, had borrowed in dollars at variable interest rates, a ticking time bomb. Every rate hike in the U.S. increased Mexico's debt burden. Every drop in oil prices reduced its income. At home, the government tried to appear calm. President Jose Lopez Portillo repeatedly declared, Mexico's future is bright. Oil was the new gold, and Mexico had plenty of it. The plan was simple. Borrow today, invest in growth. Pay back tomorrow with oil money. Every bubble in history follows the same logic. Tomorrow's income will always cover today's spending. And like every bubble, no one wanted to hear the warnings. Sadly, neither did the Mexican government. By 1981, warnings were everywhere. Oil prices began to fall. Revenues evaporated while the debt burden multiplied. Inflation rose. The peso began to collapse. Nervous investors started moving their money abroad. Politely, this is called capital flight. In reality, the wealthy were transferring their fortunes offshore. Between 1981 and 1982, billions of dollars left the country, flowing into Miami real estate, Swiss bank accounts, and Texas vaults. Lopez Portillo responded with bravado. His famous line, "I will defend the peso like a dog." It was proud. It was emotional. The public rallied behind it. But history does not forgive empty words. By early 1982, the peso was bleeding, dollar reserves were running out, and international credit had dried up. Investors had seen this movie before, and they did not believe in a happy ending. The breaking point came in August 1982. Finance Minister Jesus Silva Herzog Flores flew to New York and delivered the news lenders did not want to hear. Mexico could no longer pay its principal. A 3-month payment suspension was declared. In short, the Mexican state was bankrupt. The shock waves were global. American and European banks had billions of dollars at risk. Mexico was the first domino. If it fell hard enough, all of Latin America could collapse, taking Wall Street balance sheets with it. For ordinary Mexicans, the crisis was not about bond spreads or IMF negotiations. It was walking into a store and seeing prices double. It was being unable to buy dollars at exchange offices. It was watching lifetime savings evaporate. The peso was devalued, then devalued again. Inflation exploded. The promised prosperity was replaced by despair. Then came a shock no one expected. On September 1st, 1982, in his final address to the nation, Lopez Portillo delivered a speech that froze the country. Live on radio and television, he announced all private banks were being nationalized. Overnight, every bank became state-owned. Strict currency controls followed. Citizens could no longer freely buy or sell dollars. According to the president, the goal was to stop traitorous speculators and protect Mexico's sovereignty. Congress erupted in applause. In the streets, people stood frozen in disbelief. For many Mexicans, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath their feet. Imagine your leader saying, "Your salary, your savings, your loans, they now belong to the state." Some celebrated, believing the rich were finally being punished. Others panicked, realizing trust in the financial system had been shattered. For foreign investors, this was their worst nightmare. Mexico was not only broke, it was unpredictable. The peso collapsed even further. Inflation roared. The world realized this was not just Mexico's problem. It was the beginning of something much larger. The 1982 peso collapse did not stop at Mexico's borders. Debt suspension and bank nationalization triggered a global financial earthquake. American, European, and Japanese banks had lent tens of billions of dollars, believing sovereign states do not fail. That illusion vanished overnight. Panic spread through Washington, London, and Basel. If Mexico couldn't pay, what about Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, Peru? Within weeks, fear became reality. Latin American countries began defaulting one by one. Mexico was the first domino, but not the last. Thus was born the Latin American debt crisis, a chain reaction that nearly toppled major Western banks. Citibank, Chase Manhattan, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, all were drowning in suddenly toxic loans. The IMF rushed in with rescue packages at a heavy cost. Austerity was imposed. Public spending was slashed. Subsidies disappeared. For millions of ordinary Mexicans, rescue felt like punishment. Instead of oil-driven prosperity came wage freezes, unemployment, and soaring prices. The 1980s became known in Mexico as La Década Perdida, the lost decade. An entire generation grew up under broken promises, shrinking opportunities, and falling living standards. Dreams of joining the middle class faded. Grand speeches about sovereignty turned into dependence on international creditors. Mexico's collapse became a warning about how overconfidence, debt, and denial can destroy a nation's future. And here is the uncomfortable truth. This is not just Mexico's story. It is a repeating global cycle. Countries borrow recklessly in good times. They believe bubbles will last forever. They defend currencies with bravado and ignore early warnings. Then, when the global cycle turns, rates rise, commodity prices fall, investors panic, collapse comes fast. The rich move their money. The middle class is trapped. The poor pay the highest price. Governments respond with radical measures, capital controls, bank seizures, austerity. Do you think this only happened in the past? Consider 2008, when U.S. and European banks stood on the edge of collapse and governments intervened, while ordinary people lost jobs and homes. In 2013, Cyprus froze bank accounts and seized deposits to save its financial system. Argentina has repeatedly erased savings through peso collapses. Over the past 3 years, Turkey has battled inflation with a currency losing value week by week. Even in the United States, debt ceiling crises reveal how fragile trust in money becomes when politics and finance collide. The lesson is universal. Money is trust. If people believe their money is stable and their banks are safe, the system works. When that belief cracks, no law, decree, or nationalization can stop panic. Lopez Portillo believed he could save Mexico by seizing banks and attacking speculators. Instead, he destroyed the trust every financial system needs. You can nationalize buildings, seize vaults, print money, but you cannot force people to trust. For Americans and Europeans, Mexico's peso collapse is not distant history. It is a mirror. You have seen promises broken under pressure. You have watched wealth evaporate through crashes, bubbles, and inflation. You have heard politicians blame speculators and foreign enemies instead of admitting systemic fragility. Mexico's collapse reminds us, real wealth is not numbers during a bubble. Real wealth is resilience, surviving after illusions collapse and debts come due. Lopez Portillo tried to prove sovereignty by nationalizing banks. Within a decade, those banks were privatized again. Many sold to foreign investors. In trying to preserve independence, Mexico lost it. This is a core lesson. Governments can nationalize or privatize. They can regulate or deregulate. They can freeze accounts and seize cash. But without trust, none of it matters. When trust dies, money dies, and nations fall. Mexico defended the peso like a dog. In the end, the peso drowned and the people paid the price. The question for us is simple. When the next crisis comes, and it will we recognize the warning signs, or will we learn the hard way again? If this story gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers. I show you where to look.